But let me say good afternoon to all the learners. So please, the first thing before I forget, next week when you come here again, bring these notes again, these questions, because I got on this topic, typical exam questions, and you notice the answers are at the back. These questions I'm giving you now are very valuable for your exam preparation. So please look at the questions and then also the answers at the back. Bring them next week again. So we are busy with this topic that you see there that is called evolution. It's on the screen there. And when we think of this topic, I always ask learners, what are we really busy with? What is this actually that we're busy discussing? Who can tell us? When we talk about evolution from the point of view of biological evolution, because we are busy with biology or life sciences, what really is biological evolution? Can you please raise your hands? Because I find that most schools, teachers teach it and learners learn, but they don't know what they're busy with. What is this all about? Look at the heading there on the board. Evolution, what is it? I see no hands. People, we cannot have a situation that we study something. Like, let's say we do vertical projectiles in physical science, but you don't know what vertical is and you don't know what projectile is. When you study this whole chapter of evolution, you need to know what are you studying. I see no hands. All right, people, let me tell you. This is a theory. That's why, if you look at my notes, which, by the way, these notes are attached to you on the website, so you don't have to write down everything that I'm giving you today. I will tell you what to write down. So please have pen and paper ready, that you can write down some key points, like frequently asked questions, and then you make notes of what I'm saying. But you do not have to write down the details here, because I have attached this on today's lesson. When you get the video lesson tonight, you will see these notes that I'm posting on the board now. It's actually 54 slides. Some of them we will do next week. We will spend 2 weeks on this topic of evolution. So before I get into the topic, let me tell you that you can do very well in this in the exam. It's part of paper 2. Please write there, 54 marks. End of the year, it is 54 marks. If you study this topic 100%, there's no way that a learner can fail paper 2. So please go and study this topic 100% so that you can do well in paper 2. Then paper 1 will also, you will anyway study for that. Please write down how to study. Make a question mark there. How to study for evolution. And the key point to success in this topic is to follow the exam guidelines closely. Those 54 marks that the examiner is going to examine you on, it's covered in a scope that's given in the exam guidelines. They have to cover those points in the paper. And if it says 54 marks, they may not ask 60 or 65 or 45. It must be 54. So the way to do well is to stick exactly to the exam guidelines as you prepare yourself. But let's come back to this question about what is evolution? Evolution is more than life sciences. It's about life. This is a very, very serious topic. I'm talking about success in the exams, but let's move away from the exams. Let's talk about life. People, let's face it. There are 3 very important questions in life. The first one is we need to understand where we come from. People that believe that evolution is a fact, and I must say it's not been proven. Everything that you've studied in life sciences are facts. Some of them, like in physical science, are laws, like the laws of Newton. They've been proven over and over again. But evolution is a theory. So if you believe that all the different life forms that we have here come from Mother Nature rather than Father God, then you're a person that believes in evolution. You become an evolutionist. And you become an atheist where you say, I do not believe there's a designer of everything. Yes, everything in the world was built, even this building. You can see the bricks put together, the design of this building for the correct sound and everything, the design of the projector here, the design of the microphone, the computer, everything as a designer. But then they say your body and each and every kind of animal that you find in nature, the different species, have no designer, no creator. We got here by means of evolution. So Charles Darwin wrote his book, The Origin of Species, by means of natural selection. How did all the different species get here, the different kinds? It's by means of evolution. There's not a God necessarily. And when he released that book in 1859, it became a bestseller because the people in Europe were tired of churches. Because the churches suppressed them. The churches did not represent the God of the Bible well. They even killed people. They burned people alive for reading the Bible, the churches. So people were fed up. So when Charles Darwin came and he said, you know what? There's probably no God. We got here by gradually developing over millions of years from simple life forms, changing over time, eventually to have apes in the world. And from the apes, it took about 20 million years to have human beings. So that's what I'm saying. Today and next week's discussion is more than life sciences. Yes, I will tell you about the exams. But there's 3 questions we have to answer. Number 1, where do we come from? Why are we here as people in the world? And where are we going? Those 3 important questions. Now, if you base your thinking that there's a God, like myself, I happen to be a person that reads the Bible, study the Bible. I'm also a scientist. And I'm seeing that science is proving the Bible correct. So what I've seen is, according to me, that the Genesis account in the Bible is correct. I'm not rejecting it. Whatever is written in the Bible, I believe. But then I see it goes in contradiction with evolution. So if I believe God created me and you, then I believe He's got the right to dictate standards for how to live now and to tell us what's going to happen in the future, and that's what the Bible does. On the other hand, Professor Julian Huxley said, I now understand I've evolved from an ape. That's why I behave like an animal. Do you see, your perception of where you're coming from determines your thinking now? So how can myself, as a Christian, or some of you could be in the Islamic faith here, you read the Quran, how can we then study this topic if it's not correct? It's a theory. I love studying this topic because how can I go into a debate with certain scholars around the world and certain academics if I don't understand how they view things? So in the exams, they don't ask me as a life sciences candidate to write there if I agree or disagree. They simply ask, describe the theory of evolution and how Charles Darwin said that natural selection brings about new species. All the forming of new kinds of different animals. How did Darwin say? Then you said, Darwin said this and this and this. And you score marks by describing his theory. Then they say, compare the theory of Lamarck, a Frenchman who also had his own ideas, with Darwin's theory. And then you write those things, you even draw it in a table, you score marks. So for me as a Christian, because I know many of you are Christians and some of you are devout Muslims, you do not have to go against your own conscience when you write this. And there's no way where you have to say you agree or disagree. They just ask you the theory about it. And I always say, how can I reason with people who believe in this theory, like wherever you go next year, whether it's University of Free State, University of Joburg or Cape Town, wherever you go, you'll find these academics that believe in this. Now you have to be able to reason, otherwise they say you are ignorant. So having knowledge of this is valuable, that you can talk, but also having knowledge of God's word in the Bible is also important. So let's get into this. If you look at this, I'm saying there it's going to count 54 marks. Then the first thing, please write down and maybe you can make a bullet point or a star, or you can highlight. I'm going to give you what they frequently ask. And I'm going to just say it like that. You can color code it the way you want. They like you to understand the difference between a hypothesis and a theory. Now, evolution is not a fact, it's a theory. It basically means an idea. But who can remember what is a hypothesis? Can you recall what is a hypothesis? What is a hypothesis? Look here. Look at that key word there. When you're going to do a scientific investigation, a hypothesis is a prediction you make before you do the investigation, before you do the experiment. Then you make a prediction. That's a hypothesis. So people, you need to be able to compare a hypothesis and a theory. Now, a theory is, like Charles Darwin said here, that different life forms on Earth, the giraffe, the elephant, the chimpanzee, the human being, all originate from previous ancestors that were more primitive. And over millions of years, they've changed over time. That is his theory. Can he say that? Yes, all of us can have our theories. Nobody can stop you from making a theory. But now, do you have enough evidence? And that's what I like about a scientific theory that you see here. It is tested repeatedly by different people, and then there's experimental work. It's like the cell. The fact that your body consists out of cells have been proven by people over and over. And then a scientific theory is stronger than a theory. It becomes a fact and even a law. So take note of that. Then, look here, what is evolution? I can refer to the evolution of the motor car, how the motor car developed over 150 years gradually. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about biological evolution. Now let me pause for 20 seconds, then you read there. What is this biological evolution that they refer to? Just read there quietly for yourself. Can you make sense of what you're reading? Do you understand what they say? They say, while you're reading there, I can just explain. There was no life on Earth. Then from non-living things, suddenly something happened to change chemicals, which are non-living, into something like a unicellular organism without a nucleus in the ocean. That means single-cell living animal, or a protozoan, or a bacterium. Then over millions of years, it developed, by coincidence, chlorophyll, and they could release oxygen. And then there was more oxygen in the atmosphere. Now more life forms could form, they say. Then more millions of years passed, and simple multicellular organisms developed in the water from those unicellular, like, for instance, hydra and so on. Eventually they were like jellyfish, and eventually fish. And eventually the fish left water, had legs, and became amphibia, the frogs. And then the frogs, over millions of years, changed into reptiles, and the reptiles into birds, and the birds into mammals. And the mammals eventually formed the highest level of the mammals, the apes. And from the apes came us. I do not believe that. I do not believe that my ancestors and your ancestors were apes. Because the Bible says you were made in the image of God. And we were not in the image of apes. But please, let's take some questions, yes? Yeah, so that's there's a lot of questions that the evolutionists differ from one another. And the question you're asking is such a good question. She's asking, listen to the question, she's asking a very intelligent question. She's asking, if some fish then left the ocean and had legs, why did not all of them change? Why did some stay fish? It's a good question. You see, those evolutionists struggle to answer those questions. All right, but people, you see what we mean here. Now, what you need to know is, look here, please write down. They'd like to ask, what's the definition of biological species? When we use the word species, here are two words that you need to know. What do we mean by the concept of species? And what do we mean by the concept of population? Please write in brackets next to the word species. Write there, kind. There's 1.3 million different kinds of animals, like birds and fish and the frogs and the reptiles and plants. On planet Earth, what they found is 1.3 million different kinds. So I can say the known species are 1.3 million. Now, as an experienced marker myself, I've seen in the exam South African learners use the word species incorrectly. But please, you're going to lose marks if you use the word species in the incorrect sentence. You must use it only when you want to use the word kind. Like for instance, I could have here, like we've got a nature reserve in Bloemfontein. It's one of the few cities in the world where the whole city surrounds a nature reserve, and that's Naval Hill. So we've got a Naval Hill giraffe, and we've got blesbok, we've got wildebeest, and some others. Now, can I say that the giraffe is a different kind of animal from the springbok? Is it a different kind of animal? The giraffe is not of the same kind than the springbok. Can you see it by their looks? You can see they look different. But can we just go on looks? Because some flock of birds, you see a flock of birds and they all look the same. But you cannot necessarily just go on looks. But now do you see how I'm using the word species? If I say the giraffe is a different kind of animal from the springbok, then I say in scientific language, these two animals, giraffe and springbok, are from two different species. You see how we use the word species? People, do not be quick to use the word species everywhere. You just use it when you want to use the word kind. Like us. Are we from the same species as human beings than the gorilla? Now, gorilla has got a species, and normally it's two names in Latin. The first one is the genus name, the bigger group, and the second one, you've seen these Latin names. Like us, we belong to the genus Homo, and the species Sapiens. But how do we know, if you look at the variety of people, that the people in the far east of the world, in Asia, belong to the same species as, let's say, the people in South America? You do this test that you read here. Please read there the first bullet point that you see there. You can't just go on similar features. Because sometimes you'll think animals are of different species when they look slightly different, like dogs. Let's take dogs, for instance, where you have a big Great Dane dog that stands this high, and you have a little Chihuahua. Yet they belong to the same kind. They are dogs, eh? They're not cats. House cat is a different species from dog. They're different. But what is the test? People, do you see here what is the test? Can somebody please raise their hand when you read there? Can you explain what you read there? What is the test if two individuals belong to the same species? Maybe you catch two birds out here on the hill and you put them in a cage. They look similar, but you're not sure if they really are the same kind. The test is the following. Thank you. I think you're going to be right. Now listen carefully what he's saying, because you answered well. He says, if you have one individually a male and another one female, let's say two birds, maybe they look slightly different because the males and females look different among the birds. And they can mate, and they can have babies that can have more babies. You see, if they're fertile. Fertile means they can have babies. Then these two belong to the same species. If they can have babies together, like horse and donkey can produce a mule, but a mule is sterile, it cannot have babies. So horse and donkey are not of the same species. Cat and dog will not even look at one another to mate. They're not interested because they are of different species. You just get some of these animals that are of different species, like lion and tiger. We had one in the Bloemfontein Zoo. Lion and tiger mated, and they produced a liger. Liger. But the liger is sterile like a mule. That means lion and tiger are not of the same species. People, do you understand that now? What about population? Quickly read there. I hope you've written down, you need to know definition of species and definition of population. What's the definition of a population? So you read it there. People, this is going to bring you 3 marks in the exam. If I say go and count the population of giraffe on Naval Hill, you are not going to count the springbok. You're going to go to a certain area, it's marked off, and it's going to be today. And you come back and say, sir, today there are 4 giraffe on Naval Hill. Are you going to give me a report about the blesbok and the wildebeest? No, because we work with one species. You see what a population is? It refers to how many of one kind are found in one area at the same time. Like in this room, how many populations of living entities do you count here? How many populations in this room today of living things? I see only one. I see one species here, Homo sapiens. So what is our population? Then I must count you. Then I give a number. Then I say the population of Homo sapiens is this number 153 in this particular room at this time, you see. That's population. So if I say, how would you correct my statement? Because I'm going to make a wrong statement now. Please correct my statement. I'll give you the task. There's a hill here behind the campus, and I give you the task. This afternoon, go and determine the population of animals out here. What will you say or ask? You're going to say which species. I can't just say the population of animals. Yes, there's many different animals. They form a group. But if I use the word population, you're going to ask which species. Then I say the brown locust, not the green grasshopper. And I'll give you the species name in Latin. And I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. Then you'll have methods to determine the population of brown locust, not anything else. You see how you use the word population? So you're learning a lot of language here as we speak today in the way we speak in this topic. Now, look at these people which I've put in red. And once again, people, you do not have to write everything down because I can even forward you this whole slideshow on your WhatsApp groups as well. It's going to be on the website, monetlaproject.co.za, with the recording of this lesson. But you need to know for the exam, please write this down in your notes. You need to be able to compare the theories of, they call it Lamarck. So you can even add there behind it Lamarckism, ISM. The people that followed Lamarck, they were students of this theory of Lamarckism, which means they were disciples of Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, a Frenchman, who had ridiculous theories which were rejected. They were rejected by the scientists. Then you had Charles Darwin, who had millions and millions of scientists following him. But his followers, some of them in 1972, Stephen Gould and Niles Eldridge, these were professors in paleontology, they're studying evolution. They said, no, we cannot go along with Darwin's idea. Please write there, gradualism, that word, versus punctuated equilibrium. They came up with a new theory in 1972. Darwin wrote his book, The Origin of Species by Natural Selection, in 1859. They wrote in 1972, yes, we are followers of Darwin, but we now start to disagree. How do they disagree? People, we're going to look at Lamarck now and compare it to Darwin. But how do the people disagree with this punctuated equilibrium? Darwin said everything changed gradually over millions of years. These professors, Gould and Eldridge, said that no, it's not really gradualism. Many species came into existence, there they go. Let's say the reptiles. Then nothing happened for millions of years. And then suddenly they found in the fossils they studied that there was many new species of, let's say, the birds. Now that joins in with the creation account in the Bible, where it shows that God created the different kinds of animals in different time periods, which the Bible calls days, but it could be longer periods. So do you see there the difference between Darwin, we had gradualism, while these guys said there's rather punctuated equilibrium where for millions of years it's like punctuation, full stop, nothing happens. And then a new sentence starts. Punctuated equilibrium. Let's move on. So you need to compare Lamarck to Darwin to punctuated equilibrium theories. Right. Now please write down that you need to know the two laws. Lamarck, his whole stories were just stories, they were not even theories. And yet he had the arrogance to call them laws. So please write down number 1. He called it the law of use and disuse. And then he had the law of inheritance. Please, can you add there? The law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. The law of inheritance of acquired. When you acquire something, you get something. ACQ. The law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. Now, Lamarck, if you look here, use and disuse, his first law referred to, he said, look at the giraffe. Millions of years ago, he said there were no animals called giraffes. But there were difficult times, and there were animals that looked like horses with not very long necks. And then they wanted to get to the leaves up there, so they stretched their necks. And they stretched. And the necks got longer. Now that the necks got longer, law number 2 comes in, that they would carry over their acquired characteristic of the longer neck to the offspring. And we know what determines what your baby looks like. It's your genes. If you, let's say one of the gentlemen here, goes to the gym and he builds big muscles, becomes a bodybuilder, then he has a baby. Now suddenly the baby has got lots of muscles. It doesn't work like that. You do not transfer to the next generation what you acquire. Like, a person is in a car accident. He loses his arm. And the baby is then born with one arm. No, it doesn't work like that. Why is your baby born with 2 arms? Because it's in your genes that your baby must have 2 arms. But you lost your arm due to an accident. Those are acquired characteristics. So they're going to ask, please write down, why was Lamarck's theories rejected? Why were Lamarck's theories rejected? And it boils down to, we do not carry over to the next generation characteristics that we acquire. Rather, they are genetically propagated to the next generation. So Lamarck, look at the first one. Look at the first law. He said, basically, it's a law of use it or lose it. Lamarck said, the giraffe used his neck a lot. And because he used it so much, it got longer, and he carried it over to the next generation. Eventually, there was a new animal called a giraffe. He said, but the snake had legs. But the snake did not use his legs, so he lost it. So Lamarck proposed a law of use it or lose it. The more you use it, the better it gets. And the less you use it, you lose it. Like the mole with the eyes, he said. Are we together? And then it's carried over to the next generation. That's what he said. But it's not true. It doesn't work like that. All right, let's have a look here. People, listen. There, I've summarized for you what Lamarck said about the changes in the environment. It does not cause that it's carried over to the next generation. So his whole theory was rejected. But you wrote down there, you have to explain in the exams why they rejected Lamarck's theory. You'll see pictures like this in the exam question paper. And I think even in the paper I've given you in the second page, you see it there, where the question asked about, describe how Lamarck explained where the giraffe got his long neck. And then another question follows, why was it rejected? You see the picture there. Right, let's now look at Darwin. So people, look here. Why was Lamarck's theory not accepted? Please read there quickly. See how the marks were allocated, how they will be allocated to you as well. Why were Lamarck's theory not accepted? If you just read this silently for yourself. Acquired characteristics are not carried over to the next generation. Acquire means something new you get, like a scar in the face. It's not carried over to the baby. Right, people are moving on. You understand all of this. Now there's Charles Darwin, the father of evolution. He wrote his book in 1859 that everything comes from natural selection. Now, what was his idea all about? He rejected Lamarck. And there's his book. And he said the following. He said, for natural selection to create new species, new kinds, there must be a large number of offspring. Now, let me use an example of the giraffe. People, look at these blue words here. And while I'm talking about the giraffe, you can look at the blue words that I've highlighted here for you. Darwin said the following. He said, no, Lamarck was wrong. They didn't change because they were stretching and stretching. He says, no. From the beginning, in the population, there was a big population and there was variety. Variety is everything. There was variety in the population. There were some giraffes with short necks, some with medium, and some long necks. Then difficult times came. There was competition. The ones with short necks could not survive because they could not reach the leaves. Medium necks as well. But the ones who were fit for survival. Hence Darwin said, natural selection is all about survival of the what? Which means the one fit for the conditions where they're living. He said, now, only the ones with long necks survived. The others died out. This was a favorable trait for them. They survived, they mated. Now all their offspring will have long necks, most of them. Does it work like this in nature? It does. That is how it works in nature. Why do you think do we survive as a population of human beings? How did we survive COVID? Because some people were very susceptible to the COVID virus, coronavirus. They got it and died immediately. You know, some people, variety within us, we all look different, we're all different, makes us strong. The variety enables us to survive as a population. Because some people, you know, were in contact with the coronavirus, they never wore masks, they never got COVID. Because they had the gene already, the resistance against COVID, without a vaccine. They had it. So now, does it exist, this whole thing here, that you have in a population of, let's say, you have a population of dogs. Let's say dogs come out of the houses here in town. 1,000 of them, a big number. And here are the principles of natural selection. There must be a big number. There must be a variety of dogs in the population living here on the hill. Some small, some big, some long hair, some short hair, some curly hair, some black, some white, some no hair. They all live here on the hill. Then when times are tough, like suddenly a very cold night, suddenly it's a cold front, there's snow, tonight is -10, the dogs with short hair are not favorable for this environment, they die out. The ones with long hair survive. They mate with one another. And you come here in 100 years from now on this hill, when you see dogs here, they all have long hair. But does that prove evolution? They still stay dogs. You see, what Darwin described here is reality, but it does not lead to natural selection. It doesn't lead to new species. The dog stays a dog. He does not become a hyena. He stays a dog. And that's what evolution says. It now becomes a new species. So this is what God has built into population. Variety so that we can survive as a species. But we don't change into new species. So Darwin used that idea to describe speciation, forming of new species. Your question?
This means that basically what I'm getting is that these species that, or the offspring that survive are the ones that have alleles, right, with the favorable characteristic, right? So what if the offsprings with the allele with the favorable characteristic were heterozygous, and their offspring were now homozygous with the recessive allele? Would that offspring survive?
People, it's a good question. She's raising a very smart question. She's talking about what's in the genetic makeup of the animals, or the plants as well. Now listen to this. She's talking about the genotype, eh? But the phenotype counts. The phenotype counts. Like for instance, if you put dogs with long hair on the equator there in Brazil, in the Amazon forest where it's very hot, then the long-haired dogs cannot survive there. They die out based on their phenotype. But if the genotype is propagated into the next generation, and let's say you need for this area dogs with long hair to survive the winter, and some are born next year with short hair, they will die out then in the next generation because of the cold. And eventually you'll have a homogeneous population where only favorable traits exist. But it still does not prove new species. People look at, please write down there, basic principles of natural selection. And then you just write down these blue words, one under the other. And then while you're writing these, I can tell you that you're going to get questions like I've given you there on natural selection. Then you apply these general principles, which I've got here in blue words. Then you apply this. Then you use that example in the question paper. You always refer if they have rabbits in the question paper. Then in your answer, you say there were great variation of rabbits, some with long ears, some with short ears. Then those with long ears survived because they could hear better. Do you see? People, you must highlight what I'm saying now. Please highlight what I'm saying now. Apply the general principles of natural selection to the specific example given in the question paper. And then you refer to it all the time, to what you see in the question paper. So you bring the question paper into your answer book. You write there. People, are you going to do that? Because if you just write down the general principles that you're writing down now, they're not going to give you marks because they want you to apply these to what you see in the picture. Are we together? Right, so you're going to do that. So then Darwin ultimately said it's survival of the fittest, and it leads to, look here at the bottom, it leads to the formation of new species. So I agree with everything. This happens in nature really for the survival of the population. But I do not believe in this very last sentence. The dogs will stay dogs. They're not going to change into new species. So people, did you copy these blue words? All right, let's move on. So how would Darwin account for the long necks in giraffes? He says there was that variety, some short, some long, and then the ones with longer necks were the fittest for survival. They mated with one another because they survived, and they carried those genes over, and subsequently the next generation will all have long necks. We know that, but that was his whole explanation. So people, I hope you've written down that you must be able to compare. Now don't write down this table because I'm going to send it to you on WhatsApp, and it's on the website as well. You need to tabulate the differences between Lamarckism and Darwinism. That's the fields of study and their followers. Now this for sure, please write down in your notes the next point. For sure, I'm 100% sure that you'll get this in September and again in November in paper 2. As part of your 54 marks, please write down there, what contributes to variety within a population? These 4 points. There's 4 bullet points there that could easily count 8 marks. What contributes to the fact that we all look different? Now remember, variety makes us strong. If each person in this room was a copy of the person next to you, then the group, the team, would not be stronger than the individual, because you would just be another copy of the person next to you. But if you look at this group of beautiful young people I see in front of me, you will form a very strong team, because each one of you bring your strong point to that team. Then the team is much stronger than me. Do you see? That's a value of variety. But what causes variety in a population like us here, or the dogs, or whatever populations we've got? There's variety within the population. Number 1, meiosis. Yeah. What about meiosis? Then you describe, please write there, what about meiosis? Describe crossing over. It will bring you 4 marks. Crossing over process in meiosis. It contributes to variety. Then the other one, the random arrangement of chromosomes during metaphase 1. The random arrangement of chromosomes during metaphase 1. Describe the whole process. And during anaphase, what happens? How does it contribute to variety? They want to know that as part of this topic. It's a favorite among examiners. And then the 3 other points as well. Random fertilization of gametes, mutations means something has gone wrong, and then random mating by animals. That contributes to variety within a population. So this slide you're going to get in the exam. So let's move on. Please write down. Compare, you need to know this for the exam as well. What's the difference between continuous variation and discontinuous variation? Now people, if I take, like you guys, a group of learners, and I say, please line up here in front, from shortest to tallest at the back. And what do you have in between? Second shortest, and then bit taller, until average, and then until the tallest. So you get short on the one side, tall on the other side, and lots of variety within. Now that is continuous variation. What is discontinuous? Like if I ask all of you to fold your tongue over, I will only have 2 groups of people in this whole big lecture hall. I will have those that can fold their tongue over, and I will have those who cannot. I will not have some in-betweens. So it's either one or the other. Now that is discontinuous variation. People, are you with me? So it's just one or the other, nothing in between. So they're going to ask you in the exam, explain the difference between continuous variation in the population and discontinuous. All right. Now people, look what Darwin said further. Darwin went with his ship from England. He came down to Cape Town. And from Cape Town, he didn't go around Africa. He shot through to South America. And he went around the other side of South America, the western side. And there he got to a group of islands called the Galapagos Islands. And there he saw these birds that we also have in Bloemfontein, the finches. And he saw among them different species. Like this one is good to catch, let's say, flies out of the air, catching insects. This one is good to suck the juice out of a flower, like the nectar of a juice, or nectar of the flower. Here's one that can eat fruit. Another one is actually good for cracking nuts like a parrot. So he said, if these birds would end up on different islands, let me quickly show you. He said initially, in the ancestral species of those finches in South America, there was variety among one species. One kind had in their beaks this variety. Then they were pushed over by the wind, and they ended up on the Galapagos Islands. And look what happened on these islands. Look here. He said from mainland, they came over. Now let's say this island where I'm showing there. I hope you can see my marker here on the left-hand side on that island there. People, can you see where I am there? He said, when all those birds landed there with a variety of beaks, let's say there were a lot of trees with nuts there, then only those with beaks like parrots would survive there. And then the others die out because they're not fit for survival. It's natural selection, Darwin says. But he says because there's a geographical barrier, the conditions here, there's an ocean that's a barrier. It's a geographical barrier. It could be an ocean, it could be a river, it could be a mountain. Then this lot here would develop differently. Because he says here maybe there's a lot of insects. And those birds with the long beaks that can catch the flying insects would survive here. And then if you bring them together millions of years later, this lot, this side, will not mate with that lot. Now he says that is speciation. Please write there. Geographic speciation. Geographic speciation is due to a geographic barrier. They become isolated. So he said that would lead to natural selection. So people, please make a note there for yourself. If they ask you about the theory of natural selection, where do you study from? Where's the best notes? Please write down. The exam guidelines have got the summary. It's in the exam guidelines. You study natural selection as a paragraph question from the exam guidelines itself. It's found there. And then this whole idea of geographic isolation. Where's the best notes that you can study? Once again, please write there. For 8 marks, it's in the exam guidelines. You study it straight from there. But then add what I'm going to say now. You apply it to the question in the question paper. If they talk about tortoises on a certain island, like Darwin did here, look at what I've got on the board here. Then you go in the exam and your answer. Then you don't talk about the general things about geographic isolation there with the islands. You talk about the tortoises. On this island, the conditions were different for these tortoises, hence the others died out. And you refer all the time to the tortoises. If they talk about rabbits, you bring the rabbits in. The rabbits had variety within the population, and so you talk about that. People, are you going to do that? Then you're going to do well. Then people, you're going to do very well in this topic. It's a theory that brings us a lot of marks. Now, people, I want you to look at this. Speciation, please write down, means the forming of new kinds of plants or animals. That means new species. It's called speciation. Now, what drives speciation? Darwin said it could be geographic isolation. Now, please write next to it. Geographic isolation. When you see in the exam question paper, when you see, please write there, river, ocean, or mountain, it could cause a separation within a population that one lot cannot get to the other lot to mate. Darwin said over millions of years, then this lot will not identify that lot anymore. They will not mate, and they will be two different species due to the geographical barrier. But please write down, always refer to the specific barrier in the exam. That means, say it by name. What is the barrier? Then you say there, in this case, the barrier is the ocean. In this question, the barrier is a river. It's what we call a compulsory mark that we must give as markers. If you write down the specific barrier, we give you a mark. People, I'll come back to this slide here, but I just want to quickly move to another slide. So talking about geographic isolation, please take note that it looks like the Earth was one supercontinent like you see here on your left-hand side. Remember, they call it Pangaea. You can clearly see South America does fit in there. And Madagascar did break off there. And even North America can fit in there with Europe. So they call the northern part Eurasia. Europe and Asia. Eurasia. And for us here in the south, they called us Gondwana land. But it was one supercontinent, Pangaea. Then they say, wait a minute, geographic isolation started with the ocean in between. Look here between South America and Africa. Hence they say you find a bird in South America who's from the same ancestor as the ostrich in Africa, and the big bird of Australia, I'm not sure if it's called an emu or a moa. You get these big birds. They say they all have the same ancestor, the ostrich from Africa. But because they have geographic isolation being the ocean, they evolved separately. That's the theory behind it, the isolation, geographic isolation. And you study how to answer the paragraph question from the exam guidelines. Like here's an example that's given here. Look here. Here is one population. They're all of the same species. Let's say it's these bugs here, certain beetle. Then a river came. Now those beetles that side could not interbreed with the lot this side anymore. And over millions of years, Darwin says now, this lot will start to look at the end different from the lot here. And if you bring them together, they cannot interbreed anymore. And this is what is summarized here. It could be a mountain, a river, barrier, or an ocean. Now, people, what I've summarized here, quickly read there. This is what Darwin said about geographic barriers, how they contribute to speciation. If you write it like this, you score marks by referring to the specific example. People, what you read there, the second bullet point talks about no gene flow, which means they could not mate and they could not carry over the genes between one another. No gene flow. So what would cause speciation is geographic isolation, geographic barrier. People, I think you understand that, eh? But Darwin said, if I just go back to a few slides prior to this, he says, there's also sometimes what we call not geographic isolation, but, just want to go slightly down, reproductive isolation. Look here. Now this is where there's no geographical barrier. Let's say in a dam, you have frogs. But look at the first one there. Breeding at different times of the year. Darwin said, you have these frogs in a pond. Now some of them mate in March. Others mate in September. Eventually they live together, but they don't know one another anymore because they're breeding at different times, and he says that could lead to speciation. This is not a geographical barrier, this is reproductive isolation. Even the second bullet point, Darwin said, species-specific courtship behavior. What is that? Courtship means dating. People, if you date a boy or a girl, boyfriend, girlfriend, you are in a courtship, okay? That's how we speak in English. So Darwin said, look for instance at the peacock. Have you seen the male peacock with the beautiful flowers? Not flowers. Beautiful feathers. Peacock with the beautiful feathers. He displays it for the female. And he even has a dance. And he makes certain sounds with the dance to show off, look how fit I am. That is his courtship behavior to impress his female. But if a pigeon flies over there, the pigeon looks at this lot and says, I don't know what's wrong with this bird. Why is he doing that? People, do you realize each and every species, each and every kind of animal have got their courtship behavior, even the fish. You'll have a male fish swimming past the female, and he basically says, look at my beautiful colors. Look, I've got an orange stripe here, and look, I'm healthy, I'm fit. I'll be a good husband. People, do we have that amongst mankind? Do our males try to impress our females? Not enough, but they try. They bring flowers. It's courtship behavior. They bring a gift. They go and steal a car somewhere to show, look how rich I am. Do you see? The females among us as humankind, if we're honest, you females, do we try and get the attention of the males? Yes, it's natural. It's natural. But Darwin said it isolates us from other species. When the chimpanzee tries to impress his female by making certain sounds, we're not impressed with that. And that's what Darwin said, it becomes species specific. People, look at the other points I've got here. This also leads to reproductive isolation in plants and sometimes even infertile offspring like mules. It leads to reproductive isolation, although a mule anyway cannot reproduce. People, when I see you next week, we'll continue on this topic, including anthropology, which is human evolution. Right, all the best for the week.